Hey Alex, welcome to Money Bites.
Hi, thank you for having me. Excited to be here today.
Amazing. Just wanted to quickly intro Winnie being the community of women in tech, empowering for financial literacy, wealth building, and career. Would like to start off with what might be a one-line introduction of yourself. Number one. And two, what might be a trivia or a surprising fact about you?
Oh gosh, one line. Okay, let's see. CPO, mother, wife, partner, yoga guru. We'll leave it at that.
Love it. Love it. CPO being Chief Product Officer.
Chief Product Officer. Yes. I'm currently the Chief Product Officer at Cerebral, which is a telehealth mental health company where we offer both therapy and medication management for all.
Love it. And we'll go into that definitely. Yoga guru. Wow, that's dedication.
Yes, I love doing yoga. I think it's one of those things that if I'm not on the mat a couple times a week, you can definitely tell.
Respect, respect. Our second resident question is, what's your first memory of money?
My first memory of money. Oh, good question. My parents used to talk to me about money quite a bit. A lot of it was just around, what you use money for, how you use it, what you buy, what needs and wants are. I remember my parents talking to me about money as early as kindergarten. It's something that's so important and something that probably not enough parents do.
I love that. There's definitely a lack of discussions around money in social discourse, but also in the public education system. Make sure you discuss it openly and it's not like seen as a bad boo-boo kind of topic. I love that. That's really amazing.
Well, it's funny because I'm thinking back to when I was in middle school, I was required to take a home ec class where I had to do some cooking and some sewing. I had to be introduced to a musical instrument. I think I played the violin for a semester. You had to take PE, you had to do all of these different things, but never was there an elective or a course around money management and what it means to invest starting with your first paycheck, what it means to open up your first bank account. So you're right. It's not something that is taught, to children in the school systems.
Something we should definitely change. From your childhood, you went to college, and out of college, did you start directly as a PM or how did that first route go?
Yeah. So when I was in grad school out here in New York, I was searching the database to find an internship for the summer. And I came across one at WeightWatchers. And I had the opportunity to work on the product team because they were looking for someone to come in and help them with their food database. And so at the time, I didn't know what product management was. I didn't know that that was a career. I just knew the company WeightWatchers. And, I knew that I liked their mission. They were really helping to change people's lives. And so, I got to spend my summer with them and I absolutely loved it. I loved how product managers were solving problems for customers. And I thought to myself, this is a really cool profession. I would love to stay on after grad school. And I had the opportunity to do just that. And I was a product analyst as my first role at a grad school. And I got to work on some pretty neat projects, throughout my tenure at WeightWatchers. So, it's funny because a lot of folks, maybe start in product management, much later in their careers. They either go to business school or they have some kind of engineering background or, they sort of fall into it, a little bit later on in their career. But I was fortunate and started, at 22.
I love that. It's also you progressed fairly rapidly within Weight Watchers. So from product management, you eventually became a director of product management. What might be a lesson learned in something that you might be able to share for our women in tech community who are looking to advance their careers?
So I tried to get on the most important projects for the company. right? At first, when I was more junior, like I was, assisting, maybe a director or, a more senior product manager. But I wanted to be, where the action was. And so, right around the time where like your parents may have been joining Facebook, WeightWatchers was building its first ever, online community. We were solving the problem that, folks wanted camaraderie and motivation in between their meetings, but Facebook wasn't really the right place because, like a lot of people don't want to announce that they either lost weight or gained weight or to their entire social network, but they wanted to share that experience with others that were going through that. And so my very first project was working on that. That was a really big success for the company. And then I started working on their yearly innovations. And so the science gets better and better as time goes on. And I was able to work on those teams. So I think it's important to just, let your managers know what interests you and if you have an opportunity to take it.
I love what you just mentioned, which I think is something that I'm realizing. Well, first off, it's a bit shocking to say when your parents joined Facebook. Oh my gosh, has time flied? The second part is not only making sure that your manager is on board and is in your corner when it comes to your career progression, but also you made a really good point about making sure that you're working on something that benefits the company's business.
Yes, you want to be working on the things that are moving the needle for the organization. That is job security right there. And if you're not, like you should have conversations with your manager about like how you can, move into a role or do a little bit of extra to, maybe help out with an assignment or two. It's important to keep that dialogue going. What I will say are, managers are not mind readers. And especially today, in this remote environment, it's really hard to kind of have that like water cooler talk. So don't be shy. Don't be shy to say like, hey, coach, throw me in. I really want to, work on this, or I want this opportunity, or like, the next time something big comes up, like, please think about me. We're so busy going through our normal like day-to-day routines. And, everyone has a bunch of meetings that they're going to, or podcasts that they're filming or whatever it might be. So, don't be afraid to speak up because you're the one that is, fighting for your own career.
That totally makes sense. You should definitely be your own best advocate.
Yes.
Now that you've been on both sides, both as an IC and a manager, if you had to give one tip on how to have a great conversation or even start a conversation, what might that be?
You should just flat out say like, hey, I want to talk a little bit about my career path. I've been thinking about what it is that I want to do, and I, want to run this by you. You coming in with some ideas to start, I think really, really helps. I would never ask for feedback necessarily on the spot. Like, I think that that's a really hard way to come about, having a career talk. If someone's like, hey, can you give me some feedback? It's like, well, wait a minute, I got to like run through, everything you've worked on in the last, 6 months. I got to like think about all these things. So another idea too is if you do want to have a conversation, like just let your manager know so that like both of you come prepared to the meeting and both of you can have like a productive conversation.
I am definitely going to apply this on my next one-on-one with my manager. That's awesome. At WeightWatchers, this was also the time when you developed a industry expertise for behavioral science. Would that be the right word?
Behavior change. I'm not a scientist, but I have, read plenty of books on behavior change. And actually all of the products I have worked on, throughout my career have had some component of where the user needs to change their behavior for the outcome to be successful. But I would say pretty much every product I've worked on are not things that people typically like want to pay for. They sort of need to pay for it. Because it is going to make your life better. So yeah, I would say the majority of my career has been spent like trying to help people, change their behaviors and, and easily as possible.
There's this ongoing discussion about being a generalist as a PM versus a industry expert. Would you, having gone through your career as is, would you lean one or the other?
I think it depends on what kind of company you want to work at, right? If you want to work at a really early stage startup, being a generalist is fantastic because you need, to roll up your sleeves and dabble in a lot of different things. If you want to work in more of a later stage company, that's really where I would say the expertise comes in handy, right? Because you now have so many more users on your platform, you're delivering more value, there's more going on. Like here at Cerebral, like I'm in a later stage company right now, and we are looking for certain areas of expertise, whether that's on the design side or the product side. Like we looked for someone just recently who had a lot of experience with conversion funnels, right? Like we're trying to optimize our funnel, and we want somebody who has had analogous success in that particular area.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to go back and double click into something you also mentioned about a user's want versus need. For Winnie, this is a topic that has been heavily weighing on my mind, in that financial literacy is something that everybody says, oh, I need it. But exactly to your point, it's not something that people readily or enjoyably act on.
Yes.
What has been your experience on how to move that needle in behavioral change?
Well, let me mention, so after WeightWatchers, the next place I went to work was Elevest. And I was part of the founding team at Elevest. So really, really early stage company where we were solving the problem for the fact that women were underinvested in the stock market. Men were ending up with so much more money at the end of their lives than women were. And that's because, this was not particularly women's fault. It was the fact that Wall Street was built for men by men. Like the symbol of Wall Street is a bull. Like it doesn't get any more male than that, right? I would say that, the financial industry, just like we started our conversation, like we were not really, most of us were not taught as children, like how to, save or how to invest or, how to really plan for the future. And so Elevest was born to be able to do just that. We were hearing from women all of their pain points around money, right? Like, I don't want to have my children have to take care of me, when I'm in retirement, or I have multiple goals that I want to invest towards, but I only make one salary. Like, how am I supposed to solve for this? We would learn in our user research that women tend to be risk aware, not risk averse. So like they just wanted to ask all of the questions, but we also know that women are busy, right? Like the folks that would be listening to this podcast, like you all are thinking about your careers and like how you want to grow, and you don't want to be spending like your free time thinking about which type of investment account you should be investing in for your, your home goal or your retirement goal, right? And so at Elevest, we said, like, let's be the experts. We'll be the experts for you. We'll recommend, goals for you. And you kind of go and do your thing. And if you're curious about any of this, like we will provide little tidbits throughout the experience on why we picked a particular portfolio for you. We'll provide articles if you want to dig deeper, but we wanted you to feel like that we had your back.
Was the sort of spanning from WeightWatchers to Elevest, would you say the best way to make behavioral change is to automate it then, so that people don't have to necessarily think so much about it?
Yes. So we actually talk a lot about setting it and forgetting it. I mean, you have to be the one to decide what you're setting it to, but there's many examples of this. So I'll start first at WeightWatchers and we'll talk a little bit about Elevest. But, setting it, forgetting it when it comes to food, like one of the projects I worked on was creating amazing routines that you just go to naturally when it comes to eating, right? And so one of those might be eating the same breakfast every single morning, because it's like you don't have to think about it, and therefore you don't have to make a bad choice, right? If you're like, okay, every day I'm just going to make egg whites with avocado and, some smoothie, like that's what you do, you're doing that. And yeah, like it can be boring, but at the same time, it's like one less decision you have to make. The typical human makes 200 food decisions a day. So you can imagine that's a lot of choice. And so getting rid of some of that and putting it on autopilot is very helpful. Another example of that with finance is for everyone who, for example, has a 401k. If you go in and put your percentage to where you think is best, or where you and your financial advisor have agreed to, it's like you set it, you're like, I'm going to put 5% of my paycheck towards my 401k, and then it's on autopilot. You set it and forget it, and you're all good. So, and then like maybe the next year it's like, yeah, I was fine at 5%, now I'm going to up it to 6%, or I'm going to up it to 7%, but it's like putting it on autopilot so you don't have to like think about it or see it. And that goes for all of your financial goals.
Is the nudge needed when a user is onboarding and just getting started quite different from, say, maintaining and continuing that momentum?
That's a good question. I mean, it's obviously harder to get started, right? Because you're completely doing a 180. Yeah, a 180. Completely doing a 180. But it doesn't mean that, like, when you come back from vacation and you're back to, a routine, that, you kind of have to like get back into it, or, like it's we're about to change seasons and go into fall, and I'm sure people like have a different set of things that they're doing over the summer. And so like there are these like natural moments. I mean, holidays are another like big time period. So yeah, I mean, I think people, it's like natural to kind of like fall in and out of your patterns, but knowing that you have this place, whether or not it's Elevest or WeightWatchers or even Cerebral, which we haven't had a chance to talk about just yet, like knowing that you have a home to go back to and you have a company that like has your back, that's what's so important.
Let's get to that part then. You changing jobs,
Yeah.
but not to a lateral job. It was to a completely different industry each time, and somewhat on the earlier phase of companies, like startup-ish, which can be super scary.
Yeah, when I left Elevest, Elevest was a Series B company. I went to Cerebral, which is a Series C company. My org was about the same size. Yeah, I mean, the domain was a little bit different, but the job of product management was not different. I truly believe that if you are a great product manager, you can work in any domain. Obviously, like I had a lot of catch up to do to understand, the healthcare space, and I'm still learning, each and every day. But I feel like I was able to apply a lot of the learnings from my previous careers, at Elevest and at WeightWatchers to Cerebral. Just like weight loss, for example, your mental health is something that you also have to like keep a pulse on, right? Like you're not necessarily like weighing yourself like you are with weight loss, but at the same time, it's like you do have good days and you do have bad days, and you do have good seasons and bad seasons. And we know our mental health is not something that is linear, but it's something that ebbs and flows. And, we want to be there for our users when things get, when things are in a rough patch. And so we're creating a product experience around just that.
When you say what makes a good PM in one company that's transferable, have you seen either skill sets or characteristics that make exceptional PMs?
Yes. One of the questions I ask in reference calls is I want the person on the other end to tell me about the person I'm about to hire. I ask them if you can put these adjectives in order. And the adjectives are, leadership, analytical, and creativity, right? I have never hired a PM where leader was not the first in line, right? And I've never actually gotten far enough in, I've never actually had someone get far enough in the interview process where that answer wouldn't have been the answer. But leader, right? Like as a PM, you have to be an exceptional leader. You have a really hard job in the fact that you have to represent your customer, but then you also have to represent and get along with and get your stakeholders together, right? And so you have to collect operations requirements, you have to collect legal requirements, and you have to collect the program team's requirements, and so on and so forth. And so you need to be a good leader, and you need to communicate really well with folks so that they can understand maybe the trade-offs that you're making, the strategy that you're trying to deliver, even further out, like the vision that you all are trying to create. So I think being a leader is great. Now, the other two I said, being analytical and being creative, are also important. Like, you need to have a pulse on the data. And I don't just mean quantitative data, I also mean the qualitative data, right? Just looking at the numbers is not enough. It's not enough of a story. You also need to be talking to your users. You need to be seeing what competitors are doing. You need to be looking at like what's happening at a macro level. Like, all of that is very, very important. And then creativity. And I don't mean that you're a designer by any means. I mean that you are able to come up with interesting and different solutions to the problems that you're looking to solve for. So I'd say that those are like the three most important.
Out of curiosity, on the second point that you made in being aware of what the competitive landscape is, what do you think is the distinction between a PM and a PMM?
So I think a product marketing manager, you tend to get product marketing managers at much later stage companies. I would say like at startups, like sometimes the PM is the product marketing manager as well. But if you're fortunate enough to, have that hire, the product marketing manager, I would say, is responsible for the messaging, right? Thinking about how you want to talk about the product. Like, I think we've all heard that example of like Steve Jobs when he was creating the iPod. And it's like, yeah, you can talk about how much, gigabytes are in the iPod, or, how small it is or whatever. But at the end of the day, it ended up being like the thing that like ended up being that message was 10,000 songs in your pocket, right? And so it's coming up with that message that explains, what it is that your product does. And I can tell you that it is just as hard to come up with the messaging as it is to build your product. And I would recommend that everyone start working on the messaging when you are starting to build out the product. Like, they are two things that should be done in parallel because they both can take up a lot of time.
You also mentioned as you entered Cerebral as the CPO, the metrics and vision was another aspect that you wanted to focus on. Assessing direction, what is your principle when you are setting the vision for a new org or team?
I think it comes down to, at first, just starting with your users and understanding the problems that you need to help them solve, right? Starting there, understanding like who you're building for. And then you can start to talk about like, okay, like, where do we want to go with this thing? What are we looking to really do here? And that is exactly, what we did with the Cerebral vision, right? I think Cerebral, when it first started, was really about access to care, because it was built during a pandemic, right? And so quick access to care. But as we were talking to our users, access to care just like one time is not enough, right? Like, your mental health journey, again, is something that you're going to have to work on your entire life. And there will be good times and there will be bad times, but we want a place for our users to come back when things are a little rough, right? And so we wanted to create our vision around hand holding, wanting to be there for our users, making sure that they have a place to go forever, not just when they need quick access to care. Building out that experience is what, our strategy is really focused on now.
I love that. And I think also when you're building out from 0 to 1, that, at least for me personally, is some of the most exciting times as a PM. But we also aligned during our pre-call on the importance of deprecating products. Could you talk a bit about maybe an example in some of the metrics that you used to make those decisions?
So this is one that I actually had a really tough time with at Elevest. We we were thinking about our subscription offering as an a la carte service, and folks could come in and they could do, they could invest with us, they could book financial sessions with us, they could bank with us. However, our banking product, never really took off the way that, we had anticipated. I think it's probably because it probably wasn't the right target audience, to be honest. Folks that were coming to us for investing already had a bank and most likely had a credit card that was tied to their bank. And so we had to make the decision of like whether or not we wanted to continue forward with it or not. And at Elevest, like we were tracking ARR as our North Star metric. And so, when we were looking at like how much ARR the banking offering was bringing in, like it wasn't enough to keep it running. And some of our vendors wanted to raise, the cost of things. And that was even, I think, more of like a push to say, like, is this really, the direction that we want to go in? And so we ended up deprecating like the whole line of business. And so that's the thing, is sometimes when it's a whole line of business, like it's more than just a product decision, like it really is a business decision. But I think like at a product level, like you should always be looking at, the features that you have launched and making sure that, users are interacting with them, because if they're not, you should sunset things. Like it's like, I would say like less is more for sure, both for the user as to being able to get to the things that they actually use faster. But then also you can get so bogged down by technical debt. Right. We're doing a massive project right now on our conversion funnel. And, part of that is also a technical like cleanup of just old programs and things like that like we no longer offer at Cerebral. And so it's just like something to think about, is like, as you're a product manager, like making sure that you're, sort of removing those barriers or, cleaning up the experience as you're, building out new experiences too.
Absolutely agree with this. As a program manager of the new products team at Meta, one of our core tenets was not only experimenting with new products, but we sort of were also the gatekeepers before the product launched on deciding, should this product even launch or should we kill it at
Yeah.
experiment? So I totally agree. You need to constantly be making that assessment and decision holistically for the user.
And it's so hard because like you spent all the time like,
Yeah.
researching it and building it, and like, yeah, sunsetting is very difficult. I actually think it's probably one of the hardest parts about being a product manager.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on that, you've mentioned this a few times now, but your decision-making trade-off metrics. Would love to just hear what goes into the variables that you consider, especially if there are competing priorities, competing features.
Okay, so at Cerebral, we focus on LTV, right? Like that's our North Star metric. Like you can get your LTV higher in two ways, right? It's like two main ways. There's many ways, but like let's just say like the two major ways are, one, getting your retention up and making sure that folks are staying longer, or two, getting your CAC down and ensuring that the folks you're bringing in at a really low cost. When we're thinking about LTV, it's like we want to be really, really careful that like, okay, the folks that like, if we come up with something that's going to be great for retention and like we put that at the front of the conversion funnel, maybe folks won't buy that item, or like less folks have the opportunity to buy that item. And so your CAC might skyrocket, right? And so we have to make those trade-offs. And so one way to do that is obviously through A/B testing and seeing like, okay, like if we were to offer, therapy for a year, it's a higher price point, but only certain folks would be able to do that. Like, is it worth having that higher CAC, and is it worth, the dip in conversion? And so thinking through that a little bit, and sometimes you don't know the answer because you don't know how folks are going to react. And so doing an A/B test, I think, is a really, great way to gain some quick learnings.
100%. I realize why you put leadership as one of the top characteristic that you look for in a candidate? Because a lot of times when you're making these trade-off decisions, you're not only working with incomplete, but sometimes competing information from different XFNs. Definitely makes sense. As we start to wrap up, one last thing, just this has been quite the career journey. It's amazing what you have been able to accomplish. I want to go back to the point that you were switching industries. What might be some of the internal metrics that give you a sense of, oh, this might be time that I might need a new adventure?
So good question. For one, are you learning? Are you continuing to grow? I think that's really, really important. If you feel like you're sort of stumped and you're kind of like doing the same thing every day and your projects are, not changing, like that is definitely I'll say like a beige flag. I think another one is if, you're looking to go to the next level and there just like isn't an opportunity to do that. Either, like maybe you and your manager don't agree on like your next steps in your career, or, there just isn't an open position in what you're looking to do. Like that's definitely, another time to consider looking. I would not start to look for another job if you haven't talked to your manager yet. Like if you're sort of stumped, like don't just leave. Like I think you should actually have that conversation and talk about what you can do to grow. Because like I said, your manager's not your mind reader. And so if you haven't had those conversations, like it's important to do that. Because what I will say is like, the grass isn't necessarily always greener on the other side either. You don't know what you're going to go into next. So I would say before leaving, like make sure you have had those conversations. Like that's really, really important to do. But yeah, I mean, also like having conversations with people outside of your org just to like understand what else is out there and what other opportunities may arise. But like I said, I think it needs to be really, really thoughtful. Yeah, I wouldn't do it like in a vacuum.
That's a really good point. In full transparency, I am having these internal monologues right now as we speak. And a part of me is, I don't want to say complacency, but I know my job really well. I am sort of seen as the expert in our org. So people come
Yeah.
to me for this. Part of me don't want to leave this.
Yeah, but like you could also, I mean, you can also grow like if you're teaching others how to like in your particular area, like if you're teaching others, like that is interesting to you because you like doing that. Like that is all good and all okay. If you're getting bored by it, like I said, I would have a conversation with your manager about like what is next for you. Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And how did you find new opportunities?
Honestly, LinkedIn. LinkedIn. I mean, it's so funny because, that's actually how I found Cerebral when I got my role at Elevest. Like recruiters had reached out via LinkedIn. So I do think that having your LinkedIn profile and having it up to date and all of that is really important if you are, looking for something new. Going to networking events, I think is important. And I did a couple of those just to kind of meet people and see what was kind of happening out there. But a lot of folks get their jobs through loose connections. So I think it's important that, if you are looking to, not say no to any kind of event that you're invited to, or talking to a recruiter that writes you on LinkedIn, I mean, you should definitely be having those conversations if you're looking for new opportunities.
And as you're looking for these new opportunities, we can't let you go without the money question.
Right.
Was salary negotiation as part of wealth building? Were you proactively negotiating and making big jumps with each jump that you were making in your career?
Yeah. So what I will say about salary negotiations is like things are changing a bit because employers are now required to put salary ranges on the JDs, right? And so I think when you are starting conversations with your recruiter, you should have that conversation about that range, like right from the beginning. I think that is very, very important, because if you are looking for something that is, higher than the range, you probably should not continue on with that interview. And that's because budgets are real, and those categories are very, very real. And so I think like setting those expectations up front of like what you're looking for is important. I have had folks, like when we're like down to the wire, like say like, oh, I want like a $10,000 or $20,000 jump, and like if it's out of the range, it's actually like not really a good look, because like we had gone through this whole process all the way through. So just like something to think about, which is like a little bit different than like when I was going through the process, because I don't think that was like a requirement, but like now it is, and now these these salary ranges are posted. So I would definitely have that conversation early, and just make sure that like what you ask for is within that range.
That's a really good advice. Awesome. Well, this was fantastic, Alex. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, well, thank you, Minky. This is awesome. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for having me.
Awesome.